What is finance? This really simple question confuses a lot of people, and understandably so. I mean, finance is a really broad subject area, and so bottling it down into kind of a definition is difficult. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to provide you a definition for finance, and then we're going to walk through an example that I think illustrates what finance is all about. So let's get started with the definition. The definition of finance is, it's the science of managing money. No matter what you're talking about in finance, it always comes back to this central idea. So if you're talking about asset allocations or you're talking about planning for your retirement, you're always coming back to, okay, what is the scientific approach I'm going to take to make that decision on what is the best way to manage my money? So that's the definition. Now, you might be saying, if it's really that simple, why is finance so complicated? And the answer is, finance gets complicated really fast. And I think walking through this example I put together really kind of illustrates why that happens. Imagine for a moment you have $10,000 sitting in your bank account. And let's assume that you don't need to use this $10,000 immediately for expenses. So you don't need it for rent, you don't need it for food. You just have $10,000 sitting in your savings account. And you want to decide what is the best way to use this $10,000. Now you have really unlimited options, but let's just talk about 5 options right now. Things you could do with the $10,000. You could invest it in education and go get some training or go to school. You could put that $10,000 into a home renovation project. You could use that money to go buy a car. You could take the money and invest it in the stock market. Or you could take that money and put it in your mattress for safekeeping. So here's the question. How do you decide between those 5 options? What is the best way to manage your money? So you might be tempted at this point to say, well, each of those options have a certain rate of return. We want to put our money to work. We hopefully want to earn a little bit of money in the process. So I'm just going to pick the one that has the highest rate of return. Well, it's not really that simple. Each of these options has a rate of return, but it also has risk associated with it, a level of uncertainty. So education, for instance. How education works is you put some money, you invest some money into some education or some training, and ideally getting that training is going to translate into more money in the future, whether it's from raises or a career change or something along those lines. So there's a rate of return there on that investment. But there's also risk. There's some risk that you might not get the job that you think you're going to get. You might not get the raise. So depending on that risk also influences the rate of return. So here's the part where it starts to get really complicated, because that element of risk is different for every person. So everyone who looks at this example that I've just set out is going to have a different answer. I could think of a situation where each one of these items would be the correct choice to make depending on that individual's situation. For instance, the choice to invest in education might make more sense for a younger person than it would for an older person. It has a different risk factor, it has a different rate of return factor, and so this is how these problems get really complex really quickly. It's almost like an impossible problem to solve because there's so many different variables. And this is just 5 different options that we're looking at. Really, it's an infinite amount of options because you have an infinite way of spending your money. So that's how finance gets complicated really quickly. And you might ask, well, then if it's an impossible question to solve, do financial tools really help? And the amazing thing is, they really do. And we're going to talk through some of those examples in some of these videos. So you might be saying, what if I don't have $10,000? Why would I care? And the answer to that question is, it's not really about how much money you have. It's about financial decision making. Your goal is to make the best decision. So no matter what you're evaluating, if you're deciding what type of loan you should take out or what kind of investment you should make, or even bigger decisions like what kind of career you should go after or what city you should live in, if you can frame your decision in terms of financial impact, in terms of rate of return, in terms of risk to you, then you'll get better outcomes. What you're essentially doing is you're putting your assets and your liabilities in places based on what you think is going to happen in the future. And using financial tools and processes will lead to better outcomes that are more aligned with your goals. So to recap, what we've talked about in this video is we talked about what is finance. I gave you a definition for finance, and we also walked through an example of what to do with $10,000. Finance is about how you best manage that money.